Starting off in Forest Frontiers, I do what I do for every scenario. I put the researching to maximum funding, and I'm only researching stalls right now because I want to unlock the information kiosk for the scenario. The first thing I usually try to build is a roller coaster or something similar. What I'm actually building here is a roller coaster that I built myself in a previous installation of the game. I uninstalled the game and then reinstalled it to clear all the records, and I was actually surprised to see that my Lakeview roller coaster was actually saved. It's overall a rather cheap but also decently parametered mini steel roller coaster, which is why I decided to just build that instead of trying something new. Since this is Forest Frontier and it is the tutorial scenario, there isn't much I can tell you in terms of this is something specific that you have to do. It's a tutorial case, it's only there to really see that you get the basics of the game so that you can do the other stuff when you go into the further scenarios. Also, always make sure to actually have your park open so that guests can come in and you can make money. In terms of mechanics, I usually do it so that for every attraction I have one mechanic specifically assigned to only walk near the exits, so that if anything goes wrong, the mechanic is usually as close as possible to the exit and can fix it as soon as possible. You also saw I put the price for the roller coaster to $4.50 and then to $4. My overall idea is to focus your price for each roller coaster on its excitement rating. Since the excitement for Lakeview was at 4 something, I decided to just charge €4 for riding the roller coaster. I also placed down the usual banks and cans so that the place will be nice enough and clean, and that people can sit down when they eat or drink. I also put here the roller coaster gets a merry-go-round nearby. It's overall usually a good idea to have a gentle or a semi-thrilling ride near roller coasters so that people can sort of start up and go for something milder before going for something big like the roller coaster. As you saw for the handyman, that is a little problem with this game. It was fortunately fixed in Rollercoaster Tycoon 2. You always have to untake mow grass from them, otherwise they will spend all of their time mowing the grass instead of actually clearing the path because they are too busy mowing the grass. But I also keep handymen assigned into small areas, especially when they are assigned near roller coasters, because people are going to be throwing up a lot there and you want to keep that path clean. I do have one mechanic now set for the merry-go-round and the roller coaster. Also, both of them having 20 minutes for being checked and inspected, but that's because there's a decent enough stop time between the two so that he's not going to have to be in 2 places at once. Usually I would get a second mechanic for this, but it was so unnecessary. I just decided to keep him there since the exits were close enough. You will notice I'm skipping, that's just me taking out parts where I'm just standing there, not moving the camera, waiting for nothing to happen, because this is a tutorial scenario. There's basically nothing happening. It's just making sure that you figure out how to run a park by default. You do want to get several attractions going on for a while, because you do want to get money in and you do want to get people to go around your park. You want to get money, you want to get park value. Also, I'm not sure why this version of the game always refers to the Twister as scrambled eggs. Must be a UK thing, I suppose. And there I got the information kiosk that I wanted. So I believe I did that off screen, but once I have the information kiosk, I go to research and I put the check marks back on the things that I want to get. So right now I have that set to roller coasters because I want the next roller coaster, because you don't have to have the same type of roller coaster over and over. You can, but it's not that great of an idea. And I wanted different types of roller coasters and not just the wooden one. So here I'm setting up a drink stand. I'm not sure where to put it, but I overall put it near roller coasters because nausea can occur, and that tends to make the guests not hungry, it makes them thirsty. As you can see, merry-go-round is not really that exciting right now, or very popular. That can happen, but it's overall a good idea to have stuff like the merry-go-round, or later I'm going to be building a haunted house. It's good to have that stuff because it's indoors. When it rains in the game, which can happen, some scenarios even have a very high chance of frequent rain, it's always a good idea to have inside attractions so that people will go there and not just wander around and not give you any money because they don't ride stuff like roller coasters or Twister when it's raining. I also gave the merry-go-round a tent canvas sort of entrance appearance simply because I thought it actually worked rather well, and I'm getting the steel roller coaster right now. This is one of my favorite roller coaster types. Simply because one of the saved ones, there it is the shuttle loop. I love the shuttle loop. It is not expensive, costs less than 2,000 euros as you can see here. It has very good parameters, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of space. This will actually be really important when it comes to a scenario called Micro Park or Poke Park. It depends on the region what the scenario is called. As you can see here, 449 excitement. I decided to put the price down to 440, not 450, because I didn't want to risk people not going in because 450 was just a little too much money for them to spend. So here comes the third mechanic for shuttle loop, and a handyman for the next part and for taking care of the area around shuttle loop. As you can see here, I did make the queues for the roller coasters longer than I would for other stuff. Each square can hold 4 guests, so it's always good to recall how much room do you have in the attraction and have an adequately long queue line. So since Shuttle Loop doesn't have that much capacity, but it is a very short ride and it's also very popular very easily, I don't mind having a longer queue length there, because most of the time they don't have to wait very long before it goes down and I get more money in. So less chance of them complaining, I have been standing in this queue for so long. You also have a loan right here, which you don't have to pay it off, but it is a good idea because it does eat into your money after a while. I believe it also makes your company more valuable. And here I'm just setting up some more scenery, more decorations, just to make people a little bit happier. Most of the time it's not that necessary to do this. Usually I have very little to absolutely no special scenario or scenery going on like gardens, but tutorial scenario I can do this because I have money to spare. And look at the guests. I have 265 guests in May. This is 2 months after starting, and I already have the amount of guests that I need in the park, and my park value is also high enough, although I'm not actually looking at the number for it. I can just tell from the yellow bar it's high enough at over 600, so I actually have my goal achieved at this point. The scenario could end right now and I would have it. But I'm dropping in some flowers just to use a bit of different types of scenery. Little else reason for doing that. It's just to make the guests happy and make them actually be happy to spend more time and hopefully money in my park. Here's the haunted house that I was talking about. I decided to put it underneath the shuttle loop because that usually having a ride or an attraction going underneath or through another attraction like the roller coaster here usually puts the excitement rating up. Not very much here, but like the haunted house that I mentioned previously, it's good to have it because it's inside. Here you can see what the guests are thinking in en masse. I usually like to do this so I can see what problems there are that I might be missing. So sometimes they can be complaining that a path is really vandalized or dirty when you thought you had handyman going on there just fine. But then it turns out you didn't put the markers down for their path properly and you are missing something so they can't get to that little nuke. So people have been puking there and they've been destroying your benches and your garbage cans, which really makes guests unhappy and lowers your park value. It's always good to also see what else they might be complaining about or thinking. So if they're talking about really needing the bathroom, you know that you have to build one or more bathrooms. They can say that they aren't going to pay that much money for a certain attraction. So that tells you maybe you have to lower the price for something because it isn't that good enough for them to spend that much money in. And here we have a little shock I had where I had a station brakes failure. This is the worst kind of problem you can have here, because even just watching this in editing, it is horrible. You can see the trains didn't stop and they just punched into each other, but fortunately they didn't crash or explode. But my mechanic managed to finish it just in time. I got the log flumes. For a long time, I actually didn't build the log flumes because I always considered them to be really, really slow in terms of going around, and I was never really that good at getting decent parameters on it. So I was all like, I just don't want to bother making one with these. But they do end up being pretty decent if you know what you're doing with them at times. So here I'm just going around and I'm going over and around the log flume coaster, so to speak, again and again, because that actually makes them pretty happy about this sort of stuff. It's pretty exciting for them to see, oh hey, I was just over there. So here you can see I put the minimum waiting time for the next boat to go out to be higher than 5 seconds. I put it at 10 seconds because, as you can see here in the corner, the log flumes are very slow. They are going 1 kilometer per hour on those things. And it has happened to me before that if I don't watch out, I can have the log flumes getting stuck on the escalators there, on the chair lifts, and it will result in basically a traffic jam, and people are going to be complaining because the boat isn't moving. It is stuck at 0 kilometers per hour, so I have to close the ride and reset it and then open it up again. So it's always good to have the log flumes have a minimum waiting time of more than 5 seconds just in case. Checking what people are thinking of Haunted House. Stuff like Haunted House and Merry-Go-Round and that sort of stuff, the gentle rides are generally not that popular overall. Usually they'll be stuck at 24% popularity, maybe 30 or 40%, it depends. But they are generally only really, really popular when it rains. So let's see how the log flume is doing. 434, that's pretty decent. I put it at 350 in terms of how much you have to pay for it, because just in case, if it isn't too exciting for them, I like to put it a bit lower. You also see I have the queue length shorter than for roller coasters, always keeping in mind that the log flume is slower. One boat can hold 4 guests, so 1 square of guests fits into 1 boat. So it's always nice to keep that in mind and not make the queue length too long. Otherwise they are going to sit there, and I usually try to keep the queue length at 5 minutes or less in total. If it's at 7 minutes, then I know that I have to do something, or if it's at 10 minutes, then it's way too long and I really have to cut down on the queue length, or have to fix something on the attraction itself. And there we go, you can see the mechanic answering the phone call, so he's already going in there to fix it. I recall seeing here that the guests were talking about needing the bathroom, so I quickly reminded myself that I had to put one down. I usually don't have them free. I usually have it set to 10 cents to use the bathroom. Seems like a decent enough price. They generally don't give much money in overall, but that's fine. Observation tower built here. These do function a little bit like the information kiosk. You can have them sort of work as telling the guests where they want to go, what they can see. And I'm putting it near the log flume because, again, excitement rating could be increased. Just like with the merry-go-round in Lakeview, I have the same mechanic dealing for both of them because the entrances are, again, that close to each other. The towers are also under gentle rides, just like Haunted House and merry-go-round. They are more popular when it's raining. But these are usually like at 2 point something in terms of excitement, so usually keep that around. And I keep the price at about €1.50 because it's, you can see here, this is where a thunderstorm is coming in, so I do know that Haunted House and merry-go-round and the observation tower are going to be getting very popular very soon. But the observation tower is not a moneymaker. That's why even if the excitement is at like 2 point something, I tend to keep the price somewhat low, simply because it's not a money maker. I don't expect it to make much money. Also, this is a little trick where if you just click on the grass without having any of those little appearances checked, you don't use any money and it resets the square to being not freshly mowed, but it is not untidy. You don't have to do this because it doesn't really add much or remove much from your park value from what I remember. You actually can get a mocking prize of you received the prize for the park with the untidiest lawn. You can obtain that, but I overall like to do it just because it looks better to me. Since the Twister wasn't being very popular. What is that handyman doing over there? Yeah, you get back onto the path. Since Twister wasn't being very popular, even when it was not raining, I decided to replace it with the bumper cars. You usually don't have to do this sort of thing until you're in like further years. But here I notice I have a little problem. The bumper cars are bigger than the Twister was, so I have to... Here I remove the path so I can fiddle around and get the new attractions queue lengths to actually function properly. It's just a little trick because otherwise I would have gotten like a 1 square or at most a 2 square queue length, which is just too short for this sort of thing. So I repay more of my loan. I only have like 1,000 euros loan that I still have to pay back. No big deal. Like I said, you don't have to repay the loan, although I believe there are certain scenarios where one of your goals is to pay back your loan. I mean, you could max out your loan and never pay it back. You just have to recall that you are paying a certain amount of money back to the bank for the loan that you got out. But tutorial scenario, it's very easy to pay off your loan here, and overall I do think it's a good idea to pay the loan off. And here I'm making another bathroom just in case one bathroom isn't enough for them. 438 guests, that's like 80% at the double of the maximum that I needed for the goal. Yeah, this scenario is very boring if you know the basics of the game, because you know what you have to do. So you're basically just sitting there trying to get this done out of the way so you can get to the better scenarios that are a bit more challenging. Here I pay the loan back entirely, but I'm getting a new roller coaster in, and later you will see that I am sort of managing to build a coaster while always having to stop because I don't have enough immediate funds. And then I have to get a bit more of a loan again so I can finish it up and not have to wait because I went into the minus. It was a change in months, so I was paying everything off and then you get into minus. It can happen, there's nothing wrong with that. You just always have to keep an eye on your loan, and if you are maxed out, you really can't do anything more, so I usually do try to keep myself from maxing out my loan capacity. Yeah, usually when you get the information that one of your attractions has broken down, most of the time for what I've seen, the issue is a safety cutout. This is not very dangerous in terms of a roller coaster crashing or something like that. At least I have never seen it before. Most of the time the worst one are the station brakes failure. So here I am building a wooden mouse roller coaster. I started off with like 1,000 something as my funds at that point. I always have to watch out with these because if you use too many of those very short curves, while they are very helpful because they don't take up a lot of space, they do increase the intensity a lot, and if a roller coaster is too intense, people are not going to go on it because it's too intense for them. They don't want to feel that sick once they're done and they get off the roller coaster. So you can see I had like 12 euros in total as my funds. And I'm just sitting here waiting for enough money to come in so I can keep building the roller coaster. I was doing fine about here, and then in a few seconds, as you can see, it went from September into October, so I had to pay my staff, I had to pay the food and supplies and all of that stuff, so I got another loan back so I could finish up the roller coaster here. One of the things I'm also trying to do is I would always want to make sure that the roller coaster ends by going into the station at 20 kilometers an hour or something like that, or less if possible. I usually do this by doing brakes or similar, but I couldn't do that here. But overall, it worked out. I'm actually looking at this in editing and I'm thinking maybe I put the queue lengths for this particular roller coaster a bit too long, because you can only have 2 people in each mouse, and I had something like 10 or 12 mice, which I could have, or maybe I should have, lowered the number of tiles I used for the queue length here, but overall it was decent enough. Also, I just noticed I have the price still at 2. And while editing, I sort of missed seeing what the excitement was, so chances are it was probably not that high. Which is fair enough, it is a very fast put together roller coaster and I'm not really doing much here. I'm not trying to be super fancy because, once again, tutorial scenario. I have 466 guests. That's practically double what I need to have my goal, but I'm very close to finishing the scenario. So I'm just like slapping things down and hoping that they fit. Usually I have to wait a few seconds when looking at the guest summaries in terms of thoughts, just to see, because it usually doesn't update every second. It takes a bit, so they were still complaining about not going on something while it's raining. It hadn't been raining for a long time. Also, when you have a lot of roller coasters, majority of the guests' thoughts will be, "I feel sick." That's very normal. You can't really do anything to stop their nausea. They just sit down on benches to try to not throw up, but usually they end up throwing up anyway. So that's why you have a lot of handymen going around. So the merry-go-round has broken down for another safety cutout after just having been inspected. That tends to happen. And just in a few seconds, there we go. I have finished the scenario with a company value of €15,635.